When you are 80 or 90, are you going to be as agile in your decision making as you are today? Probably not. That's why this month on the Retirement Answer Man Show, we are going to explore whether you should make decisions today for your future self in the form of securing lifetime income using annuities. Oh yeah! Get your nerd on this month. So we're going to explore annuities on the show and whether they have a place in your retirement journey. So welcome to the show. My name is Roger Whitney. I am your host, and this is the show dedicated to helping you not just survive retirement. We want you to rock retirement, not just now while you're agile, but we want you to be able to rock retirement securely in your 80s and in your 90s, hey, maybe even into your hundreds. And I think this is a good segue from our topic last month of longevity in retirement. So today what we're going to do is we are going to focus on the basics of what the heck is an annuity. So we understand the basics, and then we'll start to piece together over the month how different types of annuities work and how they might or might not fit into your journey. So strap yourself in. It's going to be a nerdy month. We'll try to make it as fun as possible. But first, that all-important disclaimer. So I was asked recently if I could put this very annoying disclaimer at the end of the show. Now, maybe you've even mentioned this before. Well, I could, but I'm not. This is important. It's important that you remember that, hey, nobody knows your situation. Don't take advice from people that don't know you. I don't give advice to people I don't work for as a fiduciary. So think of this as helpful hints in education. This is more about you and I walking together to think critically about how do we rock retirement. But it's in your hands. So talk to your legal advisor, your tax advisor, or your financial advisor, because that's just common sense. Now, before we get into this topic of what is an annuity, these basics, we may have to get our own self out of the way so we can think critically. Let's do that in the Hot Topic segment. In this 24/7 news cycle, there are some topics that are very black and white in terms of discussion. Politically, conservative or liberal. Each one believes in their views, and they basically tell the other one they're wrong. In active management versus passive management, index-based investing versus active management, you have some camps. You have lower cost is always better, passive. You're silly if you ever do anything else. And then you have the active camp that basically says the opposite thing. Well, annuities can be included in this camp that has these polar opposites that are very adamant in their beliefs. On one hand, annuities are an extremely important class of products that make a lot of sense in retirement. And then on the other hand, there are the Ken Fishers of the world that bash annuities as the most stupid thing you would ever do. And they're just horrible, horrible products. So if we're going to have this discussion about annuities over this month, we're going to have to acknowledge some biases and check those biases at the door so you and I can talk critically so we can come to our own conclusion about annuities. And the reason is there's a lot of downside to these polarized point of view. First of all, it's very positional thinking. I'm right, you're wrong. That's not helpful to anybody. There's very little critical discussion between the two parties other than yelling back and forth. And that's not critical discussion. There's not a good dialogue going on there. There's really a lack of curiosity in this type of thinking. If I already know I am right in my position and you are an idiot, well, there's no curiosity to explore it and to keep revisiting it to check your thinking. It's an important thing to do. Just recently, I had an email exchange with a listener, Tim, who is a very learned man who was questioning my use of the term social capital because it has a rich history in the social sciences. And he was letting me know this and was worried that I was misusing social capital to talk about forms of income that come from pensions and Social Security and everything else. And it is what I had learned through, certain certifications. And we had an ongoing discussion that started very positional, but then started to be more curious and understanding. Now, he and I did not come to a agreed upon conclusion, but at least we were willing to have a critical discussion and be curious of the other side and use some critical thinking. So this is a downside when we have this positional stuff is we don't get to have that great dialogue. And then lastly, one of the downsides that's not really acknowledged enough is hidden agendas. There's the internal hidden agendas. If I am doing something a certain way, then it's very natural for me to want to defend that I made a right decision, to say, wow, I'm doing this and I'm using active management, to acknowledge that active management is stupid, as I'm being a little dramatic here, would be to infer that I am stupid, right? Or if I'm using passive, why would I ever acknowledge that there's a place for active management? Because it would basically be a reflection on my decision. So we have that internal motivation for this positional thinking. That's a hidden agenda that is a little bit subconscious. But then in terms of, I'm not picking on him, but let's use Ken Fisher, who, you can download his number of email reports on why annuities are stupid. He's a master at content marketing to get you into his sales funnel. His hidden agenda, that may not necessarily be hidden, is that they are looking to have people download these reports so they can email market them and internet ad retarget them to try to get them to become asset management clients so he and his firm can earn revenue. Legitimate thing to do. But when you're bashing one thing, you're really trying to enforce really what you have to sell them. So the hidden argument there is, yeah, this is stupid. You should pay me instead. That's not critical thinking. And we want critical thinking here. So that's some of the downsides of all of this. I'm Roger Whitney. Let me acknowledge my bias. I tend to be biased against using annuities. And I've explored it before. I have not revisited my thinking in a while, and I'm willing to do that. And that's part of what this month will be about for me. But I tend to not want to use annuities for a couple reasons. One is I don't like giving up control or options or flexibility. And annuities are extremely easy to get into, not so easy to get out of. And they're contract driven, and the contract is typically one-sided in terms of all the outs that are available. So I tend to want to keep the optionality and control of my money, or with clients in that case. So I don't use them in my practice. I haven't in a while, and there are some that we still have active, but I typically don't use them, if at all. And another disclosure, I don't sell insurance. I've given up my insurance licenses as I become fee only, and I just have a bias against using them. I'll just say that. What I think we want to do over this next month is think of it from the lens of an engineering approach. So the engineering approach, to just really summarize, is we got to define the problem. Okay, we need to provide consistent income to support the lifestyle for potentially a very, very long time. And over that time, we may not be in the same position as we are today to make good decisions. So that's the problem. We're going to want to brainstorm ideas. How could we solve for this problem? And then we want to research and generate ideas. And then once we identify some ideas, we want to identify the criteria and specify the constraints of the potential solutions so we can explore the possibilities and then select an approach. That's basically, in a very summary way, an engineering approach. What's the problem? Let's brainstorm. Let's generate some ideas and do some research, identify their criteria and constraints, explore possibilities, and then select. And that's what I think we need to do over this next 3, 4, or 5 weeks when we're looking at annuities. They aren't good or bad. They aren't smart or stupid. They're literally just a tool, just like a hammer is a tool. If you're looking at joining two things together, let's just go through this, right? If we're looking at joining two things together, one piece to another piece, well, that's the problem. We need two things to stay together. Well, what are some possible solutions? You got glue, you got nails, you got screws, you got rivets, you got welding. What's the most effective way to do it? Well, how much strength is needed to hold these things together? That's a consideration. Do you use a screw? Do you use a screw and glue? How critical is the bonding of these two things to the overall project? I mean, is this one thing that fails and people die, or is this one thing that fails and it just doesn't look as good? You want to understand that. Now you need to look at what's most efficient versus the cost. And that's always going to be a balance between resources and what you're trying to accomplish. And part of that is definitely going to be the cost of something. You know, if we're going to put two things together, one piece of wood to another, we have lots of options, and we're going to try to find a balance between what's the most efficient and the most cost effective, right? We don't want to go through the process of welding something if gluing it or nailing it is adequate. We don't need to overdo it, but we definitely don't want to underdo it. And we want to think in this engineering approach, and that's how we need to approach annuities this month. So we're going to have to check our biases at the door, and it's hard. It's hard for me, but I want to explore this because I don't want you just to rock retirement now. I want you to rock it in your slow go years in your 80s and 90s, and you'll be a different version of yourself then. And we need to acknowledge that and figure out how we manage that. All right? So check your biases. Now let's go peruse the landscape of annuities, and when we look at the basics of what exactly an annuity is. Welcome to the Practical Planning segment, where we get to talk about the exciting topic of annuities. In our team huddles over the last month or two, we've been trying to come up with some cool theme on annuities. And you know what? We just couldn't do it. But I think we need to look at this from the lens of acknowledging whether the potential of our future self at 80 and 90, and whether it makes sense for a portion of our resources to make decisions for that future self. Because right now, you're as young as you're ever going to be, and cognitively as sharp and physically as sharp as you may ever be. God willing, that's not the case, but we're acknowledging that there is some deterioration as we get older, physically, emotionally, psychologically, intellectually. So I think this is the time to make a decision whether this is something we want to do. So this annuity thing is just clouded with lots of blah. So I just want to go back to the basics, and in this segment, just talk about what is an annuity. So an annuity is, at its core, a contract that you make with an insurance company. Okay, so these are all prospectus driven. It's important to read the prospectus and understand the terms of them. And they can get extremely complicated, not just for you, but for advisors as well, because every insurance company will have different contracts with different features and different gotchas than a different insurance company. On top of that, every insurance company will have a portfolio of different annuities that they offer that change over time, much like a vintage of a wine would change. You know, the annuity that came out, XYZ annuity that came out in 2015 may have different terms than XYZ annuity that comes out in 2019. So they have vintages that all have their advantages and potentially disadvantages. So it's important to understand that they're contract driven because the contract controls everything. That's why they're so complicated. And it's a lot of legal language that can come back and potentially bite you. That's one reason that, my bias is such that it is. I don't like to buy product as much as I like to buy food. But at the base, it's a contract with an insurance company. And there are two phases to an annuity. There's what's called the accumulation phase, when the monies that you put in are being put to work in some fashion, and we'll talk about a couple of those. And then there's what's called the annuitization phase. And that is when historically you turn on the income stream that is guaranteed by the contract. So there's the accumulation and annuitization phase. And the annuitization phase is basically when you start receiving payments, monthly, annual payments, typically until you pass away, depending on the terms of the contract. In addition, annuities typically have what's called a death benefit. So if you die before you annuitize, your beneficiary is going to receive the death benefit based on the terms of the contract. A lot of times it can be the value of the contract, the value of the monies in it. Sometimes if there's riders attached, it could be a higher amount. It could be the amount originally put in. Once you annuitize, almost always there's no death benefit. So once you turn on your stream of income, which is really, hey, the insurance company is saying, I promise to pay you X amount for the rest of your life. But when you die, that money's gone because the annuity company is taking the risk of you living to 100 or whatever the number is. So that is typically an annuitization. There's no death benefit involved. Now, taxes. So during the accumulation phase, your money grows tax deferred. And that's often one of the attractive things in the sales literature is, hey, you've already maxed out your 401k, your IRA, all those other things. You can put after-tax money in here in an annuity, and it'll grow based on the performance of the annuity. And all that growth will be tax deferred. But when payments start, when you take money out of the annuity, then there's going to be some taxation. If you purchase with pre-tax dollars, say in an IRA, then all that money coming back into the IRA will then 100% be taxed when you take it out of the IRA. If you purchase an annuity with after-tax money, just money in your checking account. By the way, this might be a good spot to remind you, I'm not a CPA. I don't give tax advice. This stuff can get really tricky. So if you're making decisions on this, consult a CPA because you don't want to get this wrong. If you take money that is already after-tax money just sitting in your bank account and you buy an annuity, it could grow tax deferred. And when you start to take that money out, either through a withdrawal or through payments from the annuity company, what's going to happen is a portion of that payment shouldn't be taxable. That's the money you already put in because you already paid taxes on that money, right? And how that calculation is determined is based off of IRS life expectancy tables. So let's use an example. Let's assume you invested $100,000 in an immediate annuity, meaning it's going to start paying you payments immediately. And that $100,000 was after-tax money. And the payouts you receive are $8,000 a year. Okay. Well, if the IRS sees your life expectancy at 20 years, it's going to take that $100,000, the amount you put in, divided by 20 to determine how much of your payment is going to be tax-free, basically a return of your money, and how much of it is going to be from an investment. So in this case, $5,000 of that $8,000 would be tax-free, basically getting your own money back. And then the $3,000 would be taxed at ordinary income tax rates. Get confusing? Basically, if you're buying with after-tax money, the IRS is going to look at your life expectancy and say, hey, some of this is your own money that you're getting back. And the rest of it is the earnings on that annuity based on life expectancy. So they're going to have a ratio, and this may be a place where you want to have a CPA or at least an understanding so you don't think that whole $8,000 payment is not going to be taxed. And that's just going to be taxed at ordinary income. Now, if you take money out of annuity, stay on this tax theme, and it is prior to annuitization, turning on that annuitization phase of an annuity, if you're prior to 59 and a half and you decide to take money out, it's going to be a 10% penalty, much like an IRA works. If you're over 59 and a half, you're going to pay ordinary income on the earnings of that annuity. And the way the IRS does this is they say you're taking 100% of your earnings out first. So this is prior to annuitization. And so if you put in $100,000 and it grows to $150,000, you have not annuitized, but you want to take out $30,000 and you're over 59 and a half. You can do that, but the IRS says you're taking back 100% of your earnings first. So that entire $30,000 is going to be taxed to you as taxable income. Gets confusing, doesn't it? Those are some very basics of what an annuity is. You have an accumulation phase and you have an annuitization phase. Now, in addition to that, annuities offer a lot of riders. You have death benefit riders. You have guaranteed income riders that provide you with potential of guaranteed income without having to annuitize. And we'll get into those in a later show this month, but that allows you to avoid the irrevocable decision of annuitization. But there are a lot of riders attached that can help you customize an annuity for your particular situation or can just confuse everything. All right. So we've established that an annuity is an insurance contract with a company, and each individual contract vintage is going to have its own terms. There are two phases, accumulation phase, annuitization phase. We've talked about the death benefit. We talked about, on a high level, how taxes work and the fact that anything but earnings are ordinary income. And we talked about all these riders that we'll dive into a little bit in upcoming episodes. Now, what type of annuities are there? There are three basic types of annuities. The first one is called a fixed annuity. So a fixed annuity is going to earn a fixed interest rate that is predetermined. So it's, okay, if you buy XYZ annuity, we will pay you 3% on your money for this long, and then it will reset, much like a CD would. So it's going to have a fixed interest rate, and when and if you annuitize, the payments will be fixed at whatever the calculation are forever. They'll never go down, they'll never go up. And whatever the earnings portion of that income will be ordinary income. Now, within fixed annuities, there are what's called an immediate annuity, where basically you're going to give $100,000 as an example, for a guaranteed payment stream for the rest of your life. That's an immediate annuity. You're buying basically a pension type of payment right away, and it starts right away. Irrevocable. Once you do it, you can't stop it. There are also what are called deferred annuities, meaning that, okay, I'm going to give you $100,000. It's going to earn X amount of fixed interest that we've agreed upon in the contract. And then at a later date, I can decide to take my money back and go do something else with it, or annuitize it and get my fixed income stream for the rest of my life. So you have immediate annuities, just start my payment right now. And then you have deferred income annuities where you can allow it to grow and then at some later date decide to annuitize it or to take your money, subject to the terms of the contract, and go do something else with it. So that's the first type, fixed annuities. The second type are what are called variable annuities. So a variable annuity, when you invest your money, you put your money into the contract, it will have a menu of investment options typically based off of mutual fund options, but they're designed specifically for that annuity and sometimes are managed by lots of different investment management firms. And your money is invested in those and they go up and down, and you're not guaranteed a fixed interest rate like you might be with a fixed annuity. You're going to have whatever the performance is of the mutual fund like investments inside the variable annuity. This is a prospectus-based product. So you could have upside, you could have downside, just like with investing in any kind of investment strategy. They're typically going to have a lot higher fees than immediate annuities that are disclosed. And your annuity payments could vary based on the performance of your underlying assets. these type of annuities are generally coupled with some guaranteed income rider that will guarantee you a base income even if your assets go to zero, subject to the terms of the contract. And the potential for upside in terms of if your mutual fund-like investments do extremely well and they have lock-in guarantees, and we'll get into some of that in later episodes. But a variable contract, the big difference is it's invested in the markets in whatever strategies you select with inside the annuity. And generally the fees will be a little bit higher. You're going to have what's called mortality and expenses. And then on top of that, you're going to have investment management fees. And then there may be contract fees, etc. So that's the second type of annuity. So a little less secure from a potential earnings standpoint, more upside, but also more downside. The last is a newer breed in terms of popularity of annuity type, which is called an equity indexed annuity. And that will have money invested in a fixed account where by contract, you're said you're going to earn X amount, but you could earn additional interest based off of the performance of a formula that is specific to the contract. And typically they say it's X amount of a particular index like the S&P 500. You can see how they can get really complicated. But the overall, all this complexity is trying to provide some benefit. At least that's the argument of the manufacturers of these products. And that benefit that they're trying to provide is the benefit of tax deferral, potential growth with some guarantees of either income or the value of your contract or the value of your money, and then some creditor protection based on rules, which can vary state from state. So they're trying to provide you tax deferral, potential growth, and also it's really about the guarantees. Guaranteeing you against loss and guarantee you against a certain percentage loss, guaranteeing you a certain income for the rest of your life, even if you live to 100. That's what they're trying to provide for you. So then the question becomes for us, is it worth the cost of potentially the extra fees, the opportunity cost of doing it ourselves, the loss of optionality in terms of having flexibility to do something different 5 years, 10 years from now when life is different, because we'll lose some of that or all of that depending on how this goes. Is it worth those costs to get what they potentially could give us? That's what we're going to explore this month on the show. But for now, let's get our geek hat off and let's go get happy. Hey, welcome to the Happy Lab, where we noodle on how to live a happier life. Unfortunately, Nicole could not join me today. She is off riding her bicycle. I talked to her today and she told me that the other day she rode down the block with her children and has perfected the turn. That's pretty cool. Congratulations, Nicole. So I thought I'd take this moment at the mid-year mark to review how we're doing on our annual word. If you remember episode 252, I asked you, what's your word that is your guiding light for the rest of the year? And my word was embrace. And what that word has meant to me was there's a lot of things going on from a family perspective, from a work perspective, from a show perspective that are pretty exciting. I mean, we have the RRC where we have a group of 200 plus people that are just blowing me away at how awesome it is to walk life with these people and learn how to rock retirement together. That's pretty cool. That just started at the end of the year. And currently we're not accepting new clients until the fall because so much has been happening. We have new team members. We have Tracy. We have Janine. We have just a lot of cool things going on. And I tend to always want to look at what's next and focus on what might go wrong, which is prudent, part of being an entrepreneur. But I failed to embrace a lot of the cool stuff and realize that we've worked really hard for all of this, and hopefully we're having an important impact with people, and we get word that we are with our clients and with listeners. Just embrace that and enjoy that a little bit. And I think I've been doing pretty good on that. It's too bad Nicole's not here because she could probably tell you more than I could. But I'm going to give myself a solid B on my embrace word for 2019. And I'm happy about that. I got some work to do, but I'm very happy about that. So my question for you is, if you chose a word back in December, January, how are you doing on that word? Shoot me an email, send me a message, let me know. We'll ask you in 6 Shot Saturday. If you haven't chosen a word, I encourage you to go listen to episode 252 and find one for the rest of the year so you can have a guiding light. With that, let's go to the Smart Sprint segment.
On your marks, get set.
And we're off to set a 7-day goal to take a baby step to rock retirement and rock life. So in the next 7 days, what I would like you to do is to identify a bias that you have. Think about this. It could be annuities. It could be indexes. It could be political. It could be that maybe you have a bias that you don't have enough money. Maybe you have a scarcity bias and you always think that you're not where you need to be to make some decisions that could impact your family or your life. I think it's important that we explore where our biases are. That's what I did when I found the embrace word. My bias was everything is temporary and it's about to implode if I don't push harder. And you got to keep moving forward, but you want to embrace the good things. So whatever your bias might be, in the next 7 days, noodle on that a little bit, maybe journal and acknowledge it. And that will start the wheel of moderating it. So go do that, will you? I was supposed to do this towards the start of the show, but I forgot. So the Rock Retirement Club, which we've had open only for brief periods of time over the last 6 months. We have over 200 people in there. We have been working diligently to opening up on a more consistent basis. And in the next week or so, it will be open for enrollment. So if you want to learn more about it, you can go to rockretirementclub.com. And it will describe what's going on in the clubhouse. And then you can submit your name on the wait list. Now realize this is the club that there is a fee for it. Right now it's $44.99 a month with no obligation, or $3.99 a year for a year obligation. So there's a cost to it. There's a lot of feedback from current members to help you. But in the next week or so, we are going to be launching it so you can enroll and start walking with the wise so you can become wise. So check it out at rockretirementclub.com. And next week, we are going to dive into the next phase of evaluating annuities as part of your journey to rock retirement. You all be well, all right?
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.